All right, we're going to kick things off then. We have for this week's WTF Wednesday, what the function. We have a business function expert, which would be Mr. Bradley Gross of the Law
Right.
Office of Bradley Gross. And I love your new background. That looks really cool.
Thank you.
Uh, so today, what we're going to do is Brad has a topic we're going to jump into, talk about for a few minutes. Um, I have a bunch of questions that I'm prepared to throw Brad's way, but of course, as always on a WTF Wednesday, feel free to ask any questions that you have because this time is yours. This is an opportunity for you to be able to ask those questions that, you may have had burning and you're wanting to have an answer to. But with that being said, Brad, I'm going to have you jump in and kick things
Mhm.
off.
All right. So, good afternoon, everyone. Um, in thinking about the various things that we're going to talk about today, and I know you had a bunch of questions, Dan, and we're going to get to all of them. And anyone wants to ask a question, just fire away. Um, I I speak to new MSPs every week, anywhere from 3 to 5 new MSPs every week. And as part of my intake spiel, if you want, and talking to them and learning about their business, you know, so I will ask them what they're doing, what services they offer, facilitate, and so on. And there are always a slew of services that MSPs leave blank. They don't want to talk about them. They don't deal with them, and they usually relate to the security arena or the regulatory arena. Yeah, they'll offer endpoint protection, some sort of basic service. But when you start getting into the fact that the future in MSPs really will, I believe, will be in comprehensive, robust cybersecurity, okay, data governance, privacy, and regulatory compliance for those MSPs that work with those types of clients. MSPs are scared. You say, why aren't you offering this? Why aren't you looking into it? Oh, we're scared of being sued. We're scared of this. There's a lot of liability and so on. And essentially, it all comes down to fear. They have fear. And so, what I wanted to start off today is sort of my message to end 2025, moving into 2026. Fear is not a business strategy. Okay. It is not a guiding principle. It is instead something that you need as an MSP to overcome. And you need to overcome it as quickly and as efficiently as possible so you can then focus on more profitable endeavors. Okay. And you'd say, well, how do we do that? How do we get over it? Well, I think that understanding the fear, the basis of that will help MSPs move forward. So my message, I'm going to show you what I'm talking about in just a moment. I'll actually share a screen. But I have been preaching for years. Now I'm in my 26th year. Okay. Longer than any other lawyer. 26 years been doing this. I've seen a few things. And I can tell you that contracts are at the heart of your fear. Okay. Or lack of a good one. And what do I mean by that? Well, so if you ask people, you say, well, I'm just going to look over here to share my screen here. Let me get that going. Let me share. Okay, so if you ask MSPs, they say, I'm scared of liability and all, and then they rattle off just a couple of the lawsuits that they've heard of. The first one that you always hear about, by the way, can you see my screen now?
Yep.
First one that you always hear about, it's like sort of the seminal case on this is the Involta case in which the MSP was sued for lack of cybersecurity and so on because there was a breach. And if the MSP can be sued for this, who else, right? Who's next? And if you really look, because a lot of MSPs don't do this, if you look into the complaint, okay, let's go back to what was being alleged against the MSP, right? So the client boardman retained Involta to provide various IT services. Great. Internet managed firewall and so on. Okay. But look at this. what it says right there in the complaint. Involta offered, quote, a complete round-the-clock solution with a higher level of system performance and stability of a highly trained team. Imagine the competitive advantage, right? It had this marketing puffery that it offered. It even said, okay, that this is Involta claimed that it would be a, quote, one-stop shop for all IT needs and that the website terms and conditions, which were incorporated into the agreement, there would be, quote, no need for any other service providers for any purpose.
Mm.
Okay. So something happens. You're going to use this as the case, right? I mean, honestly, this is the case because oh, in Volta, did
We
you
are
read the
God.
complaint? Right? Do
We
you
are God.
see? Right? Do you see what's going on? You have an MSP. Whether these allegations were true or not, put that aside. This was the complaint, right? The MSP was overbroad. And it just somehow incorporated in its agreements website terms, which you and I all both know. It's a lot of puffery, a lot of marketing stuff, right? It was just incorporated into and saying things like there's no need for any other service provider. Imagine the competitive advantage you're going to gain and so on. That becomes a contract or a contract term, or at least a standard of care. So, sure, if there's a breach, of course they're going to go after you. But this is not what MSPs should be offering. This is not what a contract should say. This is right. And if you do it right at the outset with a proper contract, you don't have these types of vulnerabilities. Look at the next one here. The next one that's often cited. This is the one that was filed in San Francisco, right? Sacramento. The Mastagy lawsuit against Lantech, law firm suing an MSP. So you'd say, oh my God, see this? Law firms are suing their MSPs for things that go wrong, a security breach, and so on. All right. But if you read the complaint, and we're going to go down to, I think it was section 8 right here. Again, whether this is true or not is not the relevant point right now because there's lawsuits and they're fighting, and obviously MSP has a different side to things. I get it. But if you just look at the complaint, what's the first thing you notice on that sentence? That plaintiff and the defendant entered into a quote oral agreement,
Nice.
right? Oral agreement
Okay.
with respect to computer network advice and so on. And now look at the next paragraph. As part of its duties, it says that the MSP was responsible for backup and so on. Well, as part of its duties pursuant to an oral agreement, I guess it depends on who you're asking, right?
Right.
And what is backup and disaster recovery and what is endpoint protection? What the point is, here's a case where, according to the complaint, again, not saying it's true or not, not getting into that, where you have two parties that enter an oral agreement. Of course, if something goes wrong, they're going to be sued. Yet if you talk to people and you say, "Oh, I'm worried," yeah, I hear about law MSPs being sued. Yeah, look at the Involta case. Look at this case, the Mastagy case. Right? This is not what you should be looking at as your model. And this is what I preach to MSPs all the time. If you're going to be in this business, you got to play like the big boys. Okay. And what do the big boys do? The big boys have correct contracts. They don't enter into oral agreements where the terms might be ambiguous and vague. They don't enter into agreements that say everything that's on our website, yeah, that's included in what we're doing. And by the way, we're the best, and you'll never need anyone else. This kind of overblown language, that's never in an agreement. And so my point is, if MSPs would just invest the time, whether it's me or anyone else, invest the time in a proper agreement, you can eliminate these kinds of liabilities and you won't be, a screen share on any future podcast, right? It's not that hard. Just invest the time and a little bit of money. And of course, this one I found while I was pulling up those sites, I always found it interesting. There's a big case of Clorox was suing Cognizant, which is, more of a data organization company, right? They
Yeah.
provide metrics and so on and so forth, and say, oh, look, lawsuits are abound, right? Let's look at the lawsuit itself, right? If you read, oh, Clorox entrusted Cognizant, a self-proclaimed leader in digital cybersecurity services, to play a role. Oh, see the risk. There's such risk in here. Let's scroll down. Let's scroll down a little bit. Read this. Cognizant was not duped by any elaborate ploy or sophisticated hacking. Instead, ready? The cyber criminal just called the service desk, asked for credentials, and they handed them over. And they actually give the transcript right here. Look, cyber criminal. I don't have a password. I can't connect. So the agent says, "Oh, let me provide the password to you." So the criminal says, "Yeah, yeah, okay, right." My point in highlighting all these things is that the risks out there can be mitigated, maybe not entirely eliminated, but mitigated to the point where the risk is incredibly low. If you just have the right agreements in place, you have the right training in place so your people aren't turning over passwords and so forth. There is no reason for an MSP to not pursue a line of business because of the potential risk. Okay. Assuming that you have the right foundationally sound agreements in place and you don't do stupid things like you don't have untrained agents who are in charge of service desks. So that was my first thing. I wanted to point out that, this whole idea of governing based on fear for 2026, we need to, I'm going to stop sharing my screen there. There you go. We need to stop that. It's time to get things in order, move forward with confidence, but do it in a smart way. There you go. That's how I'm opening.
Well, I think about a couple things. One, and I'd love anybody else to jump in here too, but how many times do we, in a perfect world, everything that we're doing is managed and, the relationship starts out as
Yeah.
managed, but it doesn't always work that way. There are, break fix opportunities. We're going out there, we're doing work. Are they signing an MSA for something break fix? I would love, I don't know if you have any percentages on those. That would be awesome. But the other thing, and then I'll finish with my question is, going out and doing an assessment, going out looking at their system, maybe even them control delete, throwing in their password, username, password, and giving us access. And
Hmm.
we touch that keyboard, again, uh, is there anything in writing, So those are those would be my concerns as well. I mean, oral agreement for something managed, holy crap! But um, oral agreement for you get a phone call, we're having an issue. We do have some interest in managed services, but right now we just need to get the matter at hand taken care of.
Right. So your question about break fix and do you have an MSA apply to break fix? The answer is unequivocally yes. But you'd say, well, how do we do it? Right? How do you do it when you're not necessarily sending out even a quote or a statement of work for break fix because you might be on site and they might
Right.
say, while you're here, do this and this, and you do it. They're not signing anything, right? And if something goes wrong, certainly they'll go after you, right? But the question is, how do you protect yourself under the MSA? So I'm going to give you the answer. Here we go. First, but I will emphasize that yes, your MSA should apply to everything you do. Everything. I don't care if you're baking a cake. If they're paying you to do it, then it will apply. The idea, though, is that MSPs will provide services, they'll facilitate others. Break fix is one of those things that they will often provide, and it's often done via either a service ticket or on demand. And how do you get that covered under your MSA? Well, what I would suggest is a twofold approach. One, your MSA has to talk about that. Has to talk about from time to time, we may provide on demand services, and those on demand will be covered under this document. But how do you even get them to accept that? To begin with, the answer is every MSP that's doing break fix work should send out, if they anticipate that that's the relationship they're going to have, right? They should send out an MSP, a break fix quote, a break fix proposal. And what will it say? Because you'd say, well, break fix by nature, we don't know what we're going to do, right? I mean, it's going to happen in the future. We don't know. How do we do this? In any break fix scenario, there are known knowns and there are known unknowns. What am I talking about? Well, in a break fix scenario, what do we know? We know that I'm going to do some break fix work for you. We know this is going to happen. We know that if I do that work, I'm going to charge you by the hour unless I agree otherwise. We also know that if I do break fix work, it's only going to be done during our normal business hours and our travel rates and so forth will apply. These are the known knowns. What don't we know? We don't know what the project will be. We don't know how long it will take. We don't know how much it will cost. So, how do we create a quote or statement of work for this? Well, you lay it out, right? You lay it out. MSP will, from time to time, provide on demand, as requested services, sometimes referred to as break fix services. Okay. These, unless we agree otherwise in writing or by email, unless we agree otherwise, the following known the following policies or procedures will apply. One, the scope of the project will be determined at the time that we discuss it with you. The fees, we're going to bill you by the hour, 15-minute increments, rounded up to the next highest, minimum 1 hour. Our hourly rate is going to be this, right? Here's our travel policy. All the known knowns, you list them out. Okay. Sign here. Right. And obviously, you say somewhere in that quote, this is governed under the terms of our MSA located wherever it is. Okay. Now, your customer signs that. Now, from time to time, they ask you to do things. Is it covered under your MSA? Yeah, because you have a quote that specifically addresses that situation, right? The quote says, from time to time, we're going to do on demand services. Unless we agree otherwise, we're going to bill you by the hour. Here's our rates. Here's how we're going to do it during business hours only. You know, all your known knowns, this is governed under our MSA. They signed it. Therefore, everything you do is now covered under your MSA. That's how you protect yourself because I don't have a specific number or formal poll, but I can tell you that a good chunk of MSPs that I speak to, when I ask them, is everything covered under your MSA? Well, when we sell a product, it isn't. Most managed services are, and so no, everything you do needs to be covered under your MSA. Every time they sign something, there should be a line. This is governed by our MSA. That's how you should be doing things.
And the same goes for those scenarios of doing that assessment.
Everything. Every time, they
Yeah.
used to teach you in law school. They used to. They probably still do. If you touch a document, you own it. That's it. You touch a document, you own it, right?
Yeah.
Somebody comes into my office and says, I want you to look at my estate plan. I don't do estate work, but you know what? Let me take a look at it for you. Let me take a look, right? And I look at it and I say, yeah, it looks good. And then years later, something goes wrong. You
Mhm.
don't think they're coming after me, right?
Yeah.
Well, I don't do estate work, but you gave me the advice here. You looked at it. You told me everything was fine. My point is, if you touch a document, you own it. Same in the IT business. If you touch a system, you own that system,
Yeah.
right? Assume that they're going to go after you if something goes wrong. You're going to wish to hell that you had an MSA in place, even at an initial audit. Send out a quote for it, even if it's free, right? Here's a quote for our initial assessment. It's going to be free since you're such a wonderful person. It's governed under
Yeah.
the terms of our MSA located here, and this is when we're going to do it, and here's the time, and sign here. Done. Your
Jay, it looked
MSA
like you
has
were
to
going to
cover
jump in.
everything.
Yeah. So, Brad, I imagine now you started talking about doing break fix work, and you still have to send a quote out, and you have your MS. So your MSA then I would imagine would have to be broken out and say for this type of work, this is what applies in our MSA, and for this type of work, that's what applies. That kind of a thing. No.
No, not necessarily. Your MSA should be service agnostic. And before I go further into that, I just want to acknowledge that Mike Davis has posted a picture of him with a TRS-80 Model 3. And I know it's a Model 3 because I started programming on a TRS-80 Model 1, Level 2, 16K back in 1981. So,
And he still uses it today.
Well, that's fine. I would admire that, but
Yeah.
I always admired people who had the Model 3 because it was a more advanced computer than the one I started on.
I
Anyway,
I
just
mean,
wanted to
Brad
compliment.
does basically simple word processing. So
Very simple word processing, and it has to fit in 16K of memory. Otherwise, I'm out of memory.
I
Yeah.
So,
got you beat. My first computer was a Timex Sinclair 1000. It had 1K.
did the Sinclair come out before the Trash 80? I don't
Yep.
remember. Wow. Wow,
Yeah, had a
that's
little
okay.
membrane keyboard and a
Oh,
RF connector
Yeah.
to
yeah.
hook up to channel 3 on your TV.
Oh, those
Well
were the
done.
days.
Well
I'm
done.
I'm
It's
feeling really
interesting because
old.
anyone like 40 years or younger is going, what the hell are they talking? They're
Right.
Googling right now, TRS 80, Timex and Clay. They have no
What do
How
you
idea.
about
mean you
an
went to Toys R
Altair?
Us? What do you
How
mean you
about
went
an
to Toys R Us
Altair?
to buy your Commodore 64?
Oh, God. Did
That
I?
was my
I,
upgrade to a Commodore 64.
How about an Altair signed by Bill Gates? I made
well
that shit
done.
up, but
Well done.
that
Yes.
started here. In case nobody else knows, Microsoft is from Albuquerque.
Oh, no. Well
But go
done.
on.
Well done. But anyway, so your MSA, service agnostic. So I don't care what you're doing. It's a set of rules that govern everything you do, regardless of whether it's break fix or not. You don't have to get into the what you're doing and breaking it out in that way. You would simply say rules like, um, you know, everything we do is governed under this document. We're going to give you advice from time to time, and you should listen to us. And if something goes wrong because you didn't listen to us, that's on you, not on us, right? We're not liable for things that go wrong if you're not listening to us. So, what are we talking about? Are we talking about a managed service? Sure. Break fix? Sure. Right? Teaching them to sing and dance. You're not listening to me, it's not going to work out. So, I don't think you have to break out things in your MSA. You sweep in a very broad stroke in your MSA. It is the quote statement of work proposal. If you want to get into detail, that's where the details go. They don't go in the MSA.
And can that MSA, correct me if I'm wrong here, but can that MSA, and I'm basing it on something you've talked about in the past, so if I'm wrong, just correct me, um, be a link in the quote, or does that all the terms of that MSA need to be spelled out and printed in the quote?
Oh, hell no. We're not
Okay.
printing that in the quote. So the terms in your MSA, your MSA itself, rather, I suggest that you post it in a non-public, non-indexable location so Google won't find it. And if you do that, then you must clearly spell out in your quote, statement of work proposal, the deliverable document that you're sending to the customer. That's where you must clearly and unequivocally let them know that by accepting this document, they accept that document
Yeah.
posted wherever it is. Where MSPs run into problems is they play games and they don't make it very clear. So they'll have an entire quote with a signature block somewhere on top, and then in small print at the very bottom, maybe sometimes on gray print, gray font on a white background, it'll say, by the way, this is governed under the terms of our MSA located here. That's not clear. That's not unambiguous. And a
Yeah.
court might rule or an arbitrator might rule that that's not reasonably pointing it out. You know,
Right.
a customer might not know that it even existed. But if you start out by saying, listen, this is governed under that, or right above the signature block, very clearly, by
Yep.
accepting this document, you accept that. Oh, you have a fully enforceable agreement. Fully enforceable. It is how all the vendors do things. And they candidly, they don't care if you read their agreements.
Right.
Doesn't really matter as long as you're told about it. Whether you read it or not, that's up to you.
And as long as, like you said, is it's there, it's not hidden, it's easy to see, and it's not a question of, oh, you should have known that that was there.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. The idea behind contracts is that it goes to the party's intent. This is foundational contract law going back, to the beginning of contract law in the United States. Intent. Do the parties intend to be bound? Intent can be demonstrated by lots of different things, okay? But what a foundational principle of that idea is that the parties are aware of all the rules and regulations imposed on them by this contract. Well, how do you make them aware of that? You could do it in a lot of different ways, including saying, by accepting this, you accept that, right? And assuming your link works and it's clear and unambiguous, that shows intent. You're fine.
So I've I did what you said a while ago, and I've got it right on my whenever they accept a quote, there's a
Hmm.
link and it's
Hmm.
conspicuous.
Hmm.
I ran into an issue with a vendor though, where I tried to cancel more than 30 days before the end of the contract. And then they came back and they said, nah, no can do. You need to give us more than 90 days in writing. And I'm like, hey, I looked over the contract and it doesn't say that in there. And they said, well, it says it in this link on our website. And I went back and I'm like, that link is nowhere in the document or even any mention of it that it's on your
Right.
website.
Yeah.
So is that one of those matters that would become a legal matter? Or is there any?
Well, what if I'm hearing your example correctly, okay? You're saying that you tried to cancel, they say no, we need 90 days. And when you
Yep,
say, where does it say that in the contract? They say, well, it's on a link on the website, but that is not referenced in the contract. It's not incorporated into the
exactly.
contract in any way. Well, then it's not a contract. Then it's not a condition. Hard stop,
Okay.
mic drop. It's not a condition. You can't, it says that on your website. You know what? On my website, it says that I could cancel in 15 days. That's on my website. Well, that doesn't count. Well, why does yours count? Mine doesn't,
I like that. I
right?
like that.
I
Yeah.
have that on my site. I can show you where it says I
Yeah.
could cancel anything. The idea is that all terms have to manifest themselves in a readily apparent, unambiguous way. And to the extent that they become ambiguous, vague, to the extent that they are not specifically or expressly included in a contract, they are going to be eliminated. That's how it is.
So in a case like that, though, where they insist that, you got to keep paying out the contract and stuff, do you then have to get a lawyer to send them a letter and say, and explain exactly what you just said? And then, is
Well,
that
you
how it
shouldn't
goes?
have to. You shouldn't have to, in life, if we're going to talk about fairness, and, who believes in fairness these days? But if we're going to talk about fairness, you shouldn't have to. You should just simply point out that the term that they're pointing to is nowhere stated in the contract. Therefore, it's not part of the contract any more than terms on your website are part of the contract. You would hope that they would just back away. Unfortunately, sometimes vendors need to hear it a little bit louder and more uh, in a more stern fashion from a lawyer, right? And that should resolve the issue, especially if their contract says if litigation ensues or something happens, the prevailing party will collect its fees. That's going to be a big hammer because you could go back to them and say, it's not in here. You could even say, I talked to my lawyer. It's not in there. If I have to hire a lawyer at $400 or $500 an hour or more, I'm coming after you for the fees as well. You'll be surprised at how vendors will react to that. They don't want to
Hmm.
pay those fees. Sometimes you just have to stand up for yourself. Yeah,
Well,
I'm
all
not
of a
being
sudden,
facetious. Sometimes it's just you have to stand up for yourself.
yeah.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Mike, do you have more on that?
No, I'm the vendor I'm thinking of. Another vendor has offered to buy out the contract. Like,
Oh, yeah.
um, yeah, but not totally. So it cost me like 3 grand to get out of it early.
And that's the
So
issue, right? That sometimes these disputes are at that price point where it's not worth paying a lawyer a couple of grand to save a couple of grand. And it's,
yep,
you
especially with all the negative energy around it and
Yeah.
stuff. And
exactly. Look, I just bought something from Home Depot, not lambasting Home Depot. There's nothing wrong with that. They did. And it was about $12. And after I got home, I realized I don't need it. Am I going to return it? I don't know.
probably not.
Is it worth $12? I got to remember to bring it back and go drive the 6 miles
Yeah,
and blah, blah, blah.
if you need to go back. Yeah.
Right. So sometimes you say, I'm
Right.
just going to take the hit on the $12 because in life, it's not worth it. Well, the same here that's a microcosm, obviously, of what you're talking about. Sometimes the $3,000, you're like, is it worth hiring a lawyer, getting a letter, following up and so on? Or maybe I just take the hit and move on. I'm not saying you should or shouldn't. I'm just saying that your situation happens all the time. MSPs are faced with it all the time. Is it worth the fight? Right? Is the juice worth the squeeze? It's a business decision, man. It's what it
Yeah,
is. Yeah.
exactly. Other questions out there? Josh looks like he wants to ask a question, but
Yeah, I have several, but
Oh,
of
yes,
greater
several.
specificity than this forum will
What's
probably
the
support.
like the
Brad and I are working together on a couple of different things and unrelated. I'm about to add a tiny third one, which I hope results in a 1 to 2 page contract. But I do want to point out that a lot of us, if not all of us, have the need for a lot more of Brad's services than we realize, and even perhaps as much as our own offerings. Discovering that in advance rather than after the fact is incredibly more cost effective.
right.
So there's a nice broad generalization of what I will talk to him in greater detail later. I'm hopeful today, hint, hint, that Brad will actually dial my cell because there's one more thing and we're in the midst of a few. So I went from living a
I'm gonna call you
virtually
right now, Josh. Hang on one second.
I went from living a virtually attorney-free existence, not even working for them for 10 years, to more or less the opposite. And the best I can say about that is that at least I'm dealing with Brad.
There you go.
So,
Thank you. I appreciate that. But
Okay.
that's how it always works, right? With
Yep.
anything, with medical, this, that, right? Everything's great when you're young, and then suddenly your shoulder hurts, your neck hurts, your back hurts, right? Everything comes down at once. So just get the right advice for
Well,
me,
in that
for
case,
everyone
I'm
else.
still young, so that hasn't happened yet. And I
yeah.
must say that
Excellent.
distance better than that would be. Okay, that's it. And by
Excellent.
the way, we all have more needs, seriously, than we
Mm.
think, and finding it out in advance, and doing this up front, having structuring documents properly. It's a whole hell of a lot easier to walk into a relationship with your ducks in a row than to row up ducks later. We've certainly done
Amen.
that.
So
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've got a question about, I know that Brad at different times through asking whatever you'll advertise like a free consultation or whatever, and
Mm-hmm.
you want to kind of look at our documents and stuff. And I'm wondering, like, for my offerings, it's going to be pretty much the same. And I don't really care too much about what antivirus you used to use or whatever, because that doesn't matter to me. You're going to be using mine if you're my client. So the
Well, my
questions that I'm,
computer came with McAfee. Why do I have to pay extra?
yeah, yeah. So, in where you're at, I assume with so many MSP clients, you've got a standard MSA that covers all the different stuff that you've seen. When you sit down with a potential client, do you really care to look at the documents they already have in place, or do you just ask a few questions to um, kind of like see if there's anything lurking out there that wouldn't be in your standard agreement?
See what I can learn from others. So here's the deal. First, wow, that's truly a question with like 27 subparts, and I'm going to hit all of them. First, I have said, while it's not a formal poll, that I have counseled more MSPs than all lawyers combined. And I truly believe that, thousands and thousands of them over 26 years. So it would be peculiar for me to say, but you, Joe or Tom or Mary, your MSP is so different. Everything I do is going to be, entirely unique and from scratch. That's ridiculous, right? So, yes, there are big swaths of an agreement that will be the same because MSPs all have common denominators, right? Like my thought about advice earlier, I said, we're going to give you advice. You should listen to us. If you don't, something bad happens, it's on you. Will I use that in your MSA? Yes. In Dan's and Josh's and Mary and Joe? Of course, right? I take that because it's applicable to everybody. But what I find is that MSPs, while there are large common denominators amongst them, every MSP is a little different. Some are more security focused, some are more regulatory focused, some are more product focused, some work with certain verticals and not with others, right? And the idea is that while the MSA is agnostic, if necessary, we do, and we will very often modify it to accommodate the unique place that MSA, that the MSP sits in the industry, especially when you're operating with different verticals, especially, or if you're more of a security focus and so on. So why do I ask as part of the intake process? And you're right, I do. Whenever I speak, I say, send me your MSA. I'd love to see it. Why do I ask for it? Because I have stopped trying to predict the future. I've learned I'm not good at it. I'm actually horrible at it. I have learned that you never know what you're going to get. I will, I'm not going to say very often, but it does happen. I will get an MSA from an MSP that looks good, that really doesn't need to be anything more than wordsmithed for an hour or less. That happens. I will get an MSA, an MSP that comes to me and says, listen, I had an attorney write this, or I got it from another attorney, offers a product or this, that. So it's probably pretty good. Take a look at it. And it's the biggest piece of crap you've ever seen. Like you can't imagine that an attorney actually wrote this thing. Or you say, well, an attorney wrote it who just doesn't understand the industry. They have no clue of what the industry requires and so on. I mean, does the word co-managed appear in the agreement anywhere? Because we are operating in co-managed situations all the time. If the word co-managed doesn't appear in your MSA, then you probably have a crappy MSA, or the person who wrote it just simply doesn't understand the industry, no matter how much he or she says they do. So I'll get it from a lawyer, biggest piece of junk. Sometimes I'll get it from an MSP that says, listen, I admit it. I stole this from someone else. And then I edited it and I did a little chat GBT to see what it missed. And then I did that. Here's what I have. And I'll look at it and it's not bad. It's actually not bad. I'll say, well, give me an hour or two and we'll get this perfect. So I've stopped trying to predict the future because I'm not good at it. But that's to answer your question is, do I review these things and just for the sake of seeing what you got, maybe learning what's out there? No, I do review it because I have learned that sometimes it only requires an hour or two as opposed to a rewrite. That's why we do it.
Okay.
And that
Yeah.
has changed since I met you 8 years ago. I know that.
Mhm.
Because there was a time when you were just like a lot of us are as MSPs, you were basically jack the whole thing up and park a new car under it, keep the
Mhm.
ashtray.
Well,
So
candidly, 8 years ago, I'm being perfectly blunt, okay? MSPs were a lot less educated than they are today. They were. They were
okay,
far less educated. They were using invoices and purchase orders and thinking this is what I'm using and I should be okay. Now, with the advent of greater educational resources, people like me who speak across the industry, um, yet has never been nominated for an award. Anyway, I digress. Right? Never. It's so strange. I've been doing this now for 26 years. When I started and I recommended posting MSPs, no one was doing that. Now everyone does it like, oh, we've been doing it forever. No, you haven't. I brought that to the table in 2010. But I digress in case anyone's listening. The point is that um, MSPs now are far more educated. And so the product that we are seeing now is more often, not often, but more often suitable for what they need than not. That's why. That's why I've changed that position. But you're right. 8 years ago, it was like, you could send me whatever you got. I know it's a piece of junk. We're going to just replace it.
Brad, just, so here live
Mhm.
on WTF Wednesday, if you take a look at the chat, your award has been issued.
Oh,
My word has been
your
issued.
Your
award.
Your
award, your
award.
award.
Your award.
My
You are like
award.
Charlie Sheen now, brother. You are winning.
Where's my award?
In the
Actually,
Oh,
chat.
I
oh,
have
you've
it.
issued me
His,
that little dangling
his,
thing. Is that
Yes.
Brad,
it?
Yeah.
his
I'm pretty sure
TRS-80
you'll get it.
struggles with animated GIFs.
You know what's
Yeah.
strange? And here's the funny thing. I mean, honestly, here's the funny thing that I always, there was just a recent post on LinkedIn. I forgot who did it. Maybe Will Nobles. He said, he posted something. He said, what's an award? And basically his point was, it's really not much. I mean, yes, it's an acknowledgement by others that you've done well in this and that, but that shouldn't be, you don't do things to win an award. And honestly, I don't do things to win an award. If I did, as I wrote as a comment to his, if I did things to win an award, I would have closed up long ago and just opened a restaurant because I'm a damn good cook. But I always find it curious. I'm like, oh, channeled person of the year, you're nominated this. I'm like, 8,000 MSPs, 26 years. I lecture
Yeah,
everywhere. No one wants to give me a goddamn medal. Oh my God. Anyway,
yeah.
so I'll
Well,
just
look,
talk to my
let's
therapist after
face
this
it,
call. It'll
most
be
of the
fine.
awards out there, a lot of the awards out there are self-nominated.
Of
And
course.
so, yes,
Of course. They're pay to play kind of things. Not all of them, but a
not
lot of
all
them.
of them.
Right. A
No,
lot
Although,
of
no,
them.
Brad,
I
definitely.
get it.
I will
I get
point out that if you just read a nice letter to FIFA, that they're very likely to offer you
it.
awards.
Some sort of a medal that I can wear anywhere I go
Just
and
tell them
a
you'll show up to
statue.
all the games.
There you
Yeah.
go. I was afraid of
Yeah.
that. I was afraid when I threw the award out there, I was like, okay, okay, this could be bad.
I'm your man.
I
There you
think
go.
I did. No, I did win an award once
Hey,
from Uncle Marv. Uncle Marv, I won Best Podcast of the Year like 2 years ago.
Nice.
So I'm going to give him a plug there. Marvin B. He gave me an award, and it's a
That's
coffee mug, and
awesome.
I cherish it.
Hey
That's
Dan,
awesome.
Dan, you better make sure Brad wins this Christmas
Yeah,
giveaway.
yeah. This Dan, if you're giving out awards, this is me, lobbying. Here we
There,
go.
there we go.
yeah.
And
Let
some
Brad
of
win the
them,
grill.
Yes, here's my Dan. Give me an award face.
some of them you will never even meet
All
in an
right.
MSP that has ever heard of. So I know that for a fact. I have one in my hands from last year, and I have never met anybody that's ever heard of this. I even had to call the guy and say, well, what does this mean? Who are you? But I got it.
Buddy.
There you
Yeah.
go.
I am going to probably send it off to DC
And
pretty.
I want to win an award so I can thank all the little people. That's what I'm really waiting for. I want to
Right.
thank HBO, my parents, all the little people that helped me
Yes.
get where I
The
am. I'm
society,
ready.
the Society of Reasonably Proportioned Gentlemen will be there for you.
Yes.
There you go.
There we go.
I did introduce someone to your society the other day.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Okay, well,
Yes, he was
Nice.
bitching about not being tall, and I said, "Well, there is a group for you."
you
There we
need
go.
to give me some follow-up information so I can scare the crap out of him.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So, Brad, and if there's
Yes.
no other questions out there, I'd love to ask about AI. I don't know if
Okay.
you've heard of it, right? It's something new.
Yeah.
It's
In fact,
TRS
I'm
80
not even
doesn't do
here.
it.
I'm AI. I'm not here, actually. I'm a
True. That is true.
figment. Yeah.
So when we look at AI, there's so many things for us to take into consideration. And do our general MSAs should our general MSAs today cover that?
Mhm.
Do they with the language, the generic terminology that's in there, or do they need to be updated because we may be using AI to deliver services, but we also may be assisting them with AI tools, and it could be as simple as Copilot or ChatGPT, or more advanced things that maybe we're starting to get into some agentic agents and we're starting to resell them. what's your take and what do we need to do?
So my take is that you have to approach it from two different perspectives, MSA and a data privacy and governance policy. So let me start with the MSA. AI, the services that you're using that utilize AI, rely on AI, they are, in my view, just another service. They're another service as any other service that you are providing, albeit they are more advanced, right? They hit harder, they get more in depth. But at the end of the day, it's a service. So every MSA, every MSP should have an MSA that talks about the fact that we are using third-party services and third-party solutions. And at the end of the day, we are not responsible. And you understand this by entering into this relationship. You understand that we are not responsible for a third party solution's failures, acts, omissions, the provider's acts, omissions, and so forth, because that's the nature of the MSP business, right? We are not guarantors of a third party solution, whether it is an AI solution, a mere algorithm solution, a backup, doesn't matter. Right? Remember what I said, it has to be agnostic. So the MSA has to first broadly state third-party providers provide third-party solutions, AI or otherwise. We are not liable for failures of those solutions. That's first. So from a legal perspective, should something go wrong with the AI, you've now had them agree, okay, well, is this your solution? No, we're facilitating it. The MSA says we're not responsible. Good. But what you also need to talk about, and this is becoming more of a requirement with MSP's customers, is they need to know how AI is using their data. Where is it going, right? How is it being further used after their data is provided to the AI model, the LLM or whatever it is? And so what I now tell MSPs is that they really need to have in place a data privacy and governance policy. And that policy needs to talk about AI. And it needs to talk about it in two different ways, okay? First person, third person. What do I mean? First person. If you, the MSP, if you are using AI in your own operations to help facilitate what you do, and somehow their data is being fed into that so you can help your own operations, it's first person AI, we're using it, then you need to talk about how that data is being used, how it's not being used, what its limitations are, and have the customer understand how that data may be later incorporated or not. If you are using a third-party solution that incorporates AI, third person, you need to talk to your customers about how, to your knowledge, how those solution providers are using that data. And my suggestion, okay, is that if you are using a third-party solution for AI, that you, to the greatest extent you can, you configure it so it does not use the data in any manner for, to incorporate it for its training models, LLMs, and so forth. You turn off all those features. And then in your policy that you're offering to your customers, you say, listen, we are using vendors that are using AI. We believe that the risk reward factor, right, benefits us using AI. To our knowledge, we've turned off all training models. Your data is not going to be used in any manner except perhaps in an anonymized, de-identified way, right? You tell them that because that's what customers are looking for. If you don't tell them that, you will be bombarded with questions. You might be liable if their data is used in some precarious way because they're going to say, yeah, you're not responsible for a failure, but this isn't a failure. This is AI doing what it's supposed to do. And you didn't tell me how my data is being used. I assumed it was private. It was confidential when it wasn't. So I think that MSP is a long-winded way of saying you address it in the MSA as another service, but then you have a data privacy and governance policy to which they are bound, talking about how you use it in the first person and the third person.
Hey, Brad, doesn't that open us up to we now have to monitor how those agreements from these different AI providers change over time and notify clients? I'm thinking that that's a big bridge to cross because that is changing. And very few of them are straightforward about disclosing that.
Well, so the answer is yes. I think it does impose on you a burden now, but it's one of those burdens that, I say, and I'm not aiming at you, Josh. Yeah, I'm saying this sort of to everyone. You're in the big leagues. You got to play like a big leaguer, right? I know you do. Okay. But you know what I'm saying? MSPs, you want to start offering solutions that use AI. You want to play with the big boys? Well, wear big boy pants, right? Understand how they're using these models. If you can configure them to turn off the training models, do so. If you can't, okay. That's fine. Just tell that to your customers, right? And yeah, I think that it does impose on the MSP that's relying on this solution a duty to at least keep abreast of how these things are done.
I think
Review it
that's the
quarterly.
perfect solution is to let them know that, quite honestly, this is no different than early internet services in that if it's free, it's only free because you're the product. And
Yeah.
all the more so with this AI. The sole exception I can think of is some versions of Microsoft Copilot that expressly outline how to fence them and allow you to ring
Yep,
fence. As much as I don't want to be telling people Microsoft's AI is probably the only safe partner for you, it might be true.
it might be.
Right.
It
Yeah.
might be. I mean, it depends on how much trust you have for Microsoft. They tend to be known as a very trustworthy company. Yeah, there are problems. Everyone has problems. We could all come up, right? But Microsoft tends to do what they say they're going to do. But the answer is yeah, I do think that MSPs that are incorporating these solutions, they can't just look, you could delegate a duty, but you can't delegate responsibility ultimately. Okay. You can't delegate. So if you're going to implement a solution, then you really need to know what the solution does or doesn't do. If it fails, if there's a failure, that's not on you, right? They fail to update, they fail, patch fails, whatever, that's not on you. But you can't give them a solution where you know how it works, you know what data it's extracting, and then say, yeah, well, you should have done, you customer, you should have done the diligence on that. No, I think it's up to the MSP to explain it to their customers and stay abreast of how these models are using data.
And
And
there'd be
then,
a big difference between a client saying, hey, I want you to integrate ChatGPT with our SharePoint or Teams versus Copilot, right? I mean, obviously two different beasts. Um,
right.
the question I have for you before we close off here in this same regard is acceptable use policies. Should a current acceptable use policy be general enough to cover AI, or should acceptable use policies for our clients, should we be going to all of our clients and saying, you need to update this to incorporate AI?
So I think that an acceptable use policy is a different animal. Okay. An acceptable use policy is a policy that, from my perspective, is a policy that says, this is what you're allowed to do within the ambit of the services we are providing, right? You're allowed to do A, B, and C. You are not allowed to do D, E, and F, right? You're allowed to use the services for the features and functions advertised. You're allowed to do this, that. You are not allowed to post, obscene things. You are not allowed to use it to hack into other people's stuff. So the, what you can do, what you can't do policy, I think AI falls actually outside. AI falls into a separate data, privacy, and governance policy. And I think that those are the policies that need to be updated.
And I just want to make sure I said it correctly. I'm talking more so the acceptable use policy that the employer has with their employees as far as like technology use.
Well, so if you're okay, now I follow. So those policies I think might be a good place for the employer to talk about what's going on and how things are being used. Whatever educates the end user, that's
Yeah.
really the end goal. Whatever educates the end user, because if you don't lay out the ground rules and you don't provide the information, okay, the end user will make the rules. And those rules will not match what the MSP or the provider or the employer in this case want. And that goes back to, we'll come full circle. with the lawsuits, like the Mastagy lawsuit, right? Where there's a quote oral agreement. Okay, again, not saying that was the case or not, but let's assume,
Right.
for the sake of
Yeah.
argument, it was. Okay, let's assume. Well, you have an oral agreement. Who makes the rules? Whoever's wronged, right?
Right.
In that case, whoever's wronged is going to make the rules because they're going to say, I thought A, B, and C was included when you offered me D, E, and F. And here we go. More
Yeah.
information, not less.
Awesome. We are at the top of the hour. I want to be respectful of Brad's time. Brad, as always, I greatly appreciate your friendship and all of your help in educating our community. For anybody that's out there listening that's not familiar with Brad, definitely check him out, bradleygross.com.
Who the hell could that be?
Well, apparently it's whoever runs award shows.
Yes.
Just
Yeah.
saying.
You got to
Yes,
mention his book
exactly.
too.
Well,
Yeah.
we do have 40,000 subscribers on our YouTube channel now, so there may be a couple of them that
That's
aren't familiar
amazing.
with Brad. So for those two that aren't familiar, there you go. But yes, again, Brad, thank you for your time, and
Thank you.
everybody else, thank you for being here, and we'll see you guys on Friday.